Once we decide we need to create some layers, the place we want to visit is the Layer Properties Manager. This is our one-stop shop for creating and managing the layers in our drawing. As you can see, I've just launched my AutoCAD 2011 and I'm sitting in the default drawing file. I'm going to open the Layer Properties Manager by moving up to the Layers panel and clicking this icon. And the first thing we notice is that the Layer Properties Manager is huge. Fortunately, this guy's a palette, so if I were to move my cursor out, it will collapse. Since we're going to be focusing on the manager for a little while, I'm going to move my cursor back to open this up, and I'll click the Auto Hide button to turn that feature off. This way the palette will stay open until such time as I move up and click this X to close it. First of all, take a look at the top of the palette. This is where AutoCAD tells us the name of the current layer. Any geometry that I create will be drawn on the current layer. In this case, it's layer 0. Over here to the right, I can see a listing of all of the layers in my drawing, as well as their settings. Since this is the default drawing, I only have one layer, just layer 0. In fact, layer 0 is kind of a special layer. Every AutoCAD drawing starts with layer 0, and you cannot rename or delete this layer. Every AutoCAD drawing has to have a layer 0. Let's take a look at the layer settings. These guys are arranged in columns, just like Microsoft Excel. And sometimes the columns aren't wide enough to read the headings. To widen these up, you can click and hold in between the columns, and you can drag these out to make them whatever width you like. Better yet, if you right-click on a column heading, you can come down and select Maximize All Columns, such that you can read all of the header information. Now, this does make the columns take up more space, so you may have to come down here and click and hold on this slider and drag it to the left or right, such that you can see all of your settings. To change a layer setting, all you have to do is click on it. For instance, I'm going to click this first icon. This light bulb turns the layer on and off. If I click this, AutoCAD brings up a warning. It says, hey, you're turning the current layer off. Do you want to do that? In this case, yes, I do. So I'll click to accept this option. And if I had any geometry on this layer, that geometry would no longer be visible on screen. I'm going to click the light bulb to turn this layer back on. And let's take a look at this setting, color. This controls the color of my layer. If I click this color swatch, it brings up AutoCAD's color selector, where I can choose from any one of 255 standard color choices. I'm going to leave this set to the default of white, and I'll click OK. Let's take a look at this setting, line type. This controls the appearance of my geometry. Is it going to look like a solid continuous line, or is it going to be broken up into various sized dashes? I'm going to click to make an adjustment, and AutoCAD brings up the Select Line Type dialog box. From here, I can select from any of the line types that are loaded into the current drawing. Right now, I only have the one line type, continuous. I'm going to come down and select Load, and from this menu, I can choose from any of the line types that come pre-installed with AutoCAD 2011. As an example, I'll select a line type and click OK to load it into my drawing. At this point, if I wanted to, I could select the line type and click OK to assign it to the layer. But I'm going to leave layer 0 set to the default of continuous, so I'll just click OK. Finally, let's take a look at line weight. I'm going to click this to make a change. This brings up the line weight dialog box. From here, I can select a line thickness that I want the geometry on this layer to have when my drawing is plotted. Now, we'll talk more about line weights when we get into our chapter on plotting. For right now, I'm going to leave this set to the default, and I'll click OK. Let's create a new layer. To do that, I'll click the New Layer icon. Then I'll give my layer a name. I'm going to call this Part, and I'll press Enter. I'll come down and click the color swatch, and I'm going to make this layer yellow, and I'll click OK. Finally, I'll set this layer Current. To do that, I'll ensure the layer is selected, and then I'll click this green check. Notice we can see the current layer reflected here. I'm going to click the X to close the manager. And as a side note, notice that we can also see the current layer name here. I'm going to create some geometry. And notice how this circle is taking on the appearance of the layer settings. This circle appears yellow because the layer that it's sitting on is yellow. In fact, anything that I create in this layer will assume the properties of the layer. Let's make a change. I'm going to click the icon to bring back the Layer Properties Manager. And let's say I'd like to change the name of this layer. To do that, I'll click the layer to select it. And then I'll click again to get access to the name, and maybe this layer was supposed to be called Object. I'll press Enter to accept that, and then I'll click the color swatch, and let's make this magenta, and I'll click OK, and then I'll close the manager. Notice how my geometry has taken on the new layer settings. I'm going to create another new layer. I'll click the new layer icon, and I'd like to create a layer for my hidden lines. So I'll call this layer Hidden Lines, and I'll press Enter. Now, unfortunately, the layer name's being truncated because the column width isn't wide enough. So I'm going to click in between these columns, and I'll drag this over a little bit. Then I'll change the color of this layer. I'll make it cyan, and I'll click OK. Then I'll come down and click on the line type setting. I'll select Load, and as long as I'm here, notice that several of the line types at the top of this list start with ACAD ISO. If you're working with imperial measurements, stay away from these line types because these guys are pre-scaled for metric use. I'm going to come down to the hidden lines area. Notice I have three choices. The difference between these guys is the size of the dashes. I'll select the standard hidden line type and click OK. This loads it into the current drawing. I will then select it and click OK to assign it to my layer. Finally, I'll set this layer current by clicking the green check. I'll close the manager and I'll create some more geometry. This time I'll create a rectangle. And once again, since my rectangle was created on the hidden lines layer, it's taking on those properties. Let's set layer 0 current. Here's a shortcut. A really quick way we can set a layer current is by simply double clicking on the layer name. I'll close the manager, and now everything that I create is being drawn on layer 0. I'd like to do one more thing. I'm going to launch the erase command, and I'll select this geometry and right-click. Essentially, I've just erased everything on the object layer. Let's bring back the manager and take a look at the icons in the status column. Notice the icon next to the object layer is grayed out. That tells me that there's nothing on this layer. And at this point, I could ask myself if I really need this layer. If not, I can select it and click this red X to delete it. Whenever you're adding geometry to your drawing, ask yourself, does this geometry need to be a particular line type or line weight? Is this something I may want to turn off when I print my drawing? If your answer is yes, you'll want to visit the Layer Properties Manager and create a new layer.